In this video, I'm going to show you how to replace the water pump on this Volkswagen Jetta. Let's get into it. We're going to pull the battery cover off, just slide it up. There may be some little tabs that you have to push in on both sides. Push those in. We'll go to the negative terminal. Using a 10mm socket or wrench, we want to loosen up this nut. Take the connector off and just set it aside. Pull the engine cover off. There may be little covers over here you have to take off with a straight blade screwdriver, and then some nuts or some bolts, 10mm, take those out, and then just slide this up out of the way.
There should be a panel in this area. This vehicle doesn't have it. There should be some T15s that you're going to need to take those screws out and then pull the panel off. So you want to start by doing that.
Now you want to drain the coolant before you get into the water pump. There's the drain right here. You just have a drain bucket underneath and then just loosen this up and just drain the coolant out. Close that up. We'll take this passenger front wheel off. Use a 17mm socket. Take the lug nuts off. When I get to the last one, I just hold the wheel on so it doesn't fall. And pull the wheel off. We're going to remove this inner fender well. There may be some push pins over here. Just use a trim tool. Pop those out. And then there's fasteners throughout. We're going to use a T25 to take those out. And slide that out. Just so we can see more, we're going to take this intercooler pipe off. You could try to work around it, but it's going to be a little more difficult. Right here, there is a little clamp. If you just use a pick, you can get underneath here. There's a nut right here. Use a 10mm socket. Take that nut off. And using some hose clamps over here, we'll just pop this off. Slide that to the side. Use a pick. Just get underneath. There might be some oil in here. Just pull that off. And just slide that off there. Comes right off. Using a 16mm wrench, I'm going to loosen up the tensioner. Just push towards the back of the vehicle. Then you can pop the belt off. And we'll loosen that up. It just slides right up. You take the belt off the idler pulley, off the alternator, and off the power steering pulley. I'll just slide it out. Using some hose clamp pliers, just going to move this hose clamp. Slide that down, and grab this pipe, give it a wiggle. Slide it off right there. Right down here, you're going to take an 8mm socket, loosen up this worm clamp. That should be good like that. With that loose, I'm going to slide the tube off. Just give it a wiggle. It should slide out. Just carefully feed it out. If there's any wires attached to it, you want to disconnect those. This vehicle doesn't have anything connected to it. Just twist it. You just keep twisting it and it'll come right out. Watch out for those fuel lines. Now we're going to take this bolt out right here, use a 13mm socket. Make sure the hoses are out of the way. Pull that out. You can see further down, if you push that out of the way, you have 3 other bolts that you need to remove. Take those out. Same 13mm socket. And pull that last bolt out, and then this will be loose. And it's easiest to just drop this tensioner down towards the floor. If you want to grab it from underneath, that works as well. And disconnect this connector right here. Just push the 2 tabs down and slide it off. There's just a wire retainer right there. Slide that out of the way. This hose right here, you want to pop this off. Just use some hose clamp pliers. Make sure the vehicle's cool while you're doing this. You don't want to take this off while it's hot. Slide that down and twist the hose back and forth. And slide it off. Now we're going to take these 2 screws out using a Phillips head screwdriver. And slide those out. Tip this up. Underneath, we'll just take this hose clamp off, just using the hose clamp pliers. And just move it down. Just like that. I'll just use a pick, just loosen up the seal right there. Take the bottle, just twist it a little bit. And you can slide it off out of the way. And we're going to take this bolt out right here. Use a 5mm hex socket. Pull that out. Now before we move this reservoir, we want to drain the fluid out. I'm just going to take the cap off. Just using a fluid transfer pump. Just suck the fluid out. I'm going to put the cap back on for now. Then we're going to take this hose off. Just use the hose clamp pliers. Slide that down. Wiggle it back and forth. And slide this hose out of the way in the back. If you want, you can put a plug in it so it doesn't leak any fluid. And then with the reservoir still tipped up, just going to slide this to the front and out of the way. For the back side of the engine, we're going to need to remove this piece. This is for the air pump. The reason why I'm removing it now is because we are going to put an engine support here, and that's going to be in the way, a little bit bulky. So it's a little easier to remove it at this point. So we're going to start by taking this snorkel off, take these two clamps off. Just use the hose clamp pliers. And just give it a twist. Slide that off and slide that off. There's a vacuum hose right here clipped in. You want to pop this out of the clips. Slide that out of the way. There's another hose right here. Just use a screwdriver, loosen up that worm clamp. If you have a clamp here like this, you might have to cut that off and just put a worm clamp on afterwards. Slide that out of the way. Just pop it off. I'm just going to take the clamp off so I don't lose it. Down below here, there's a bracket. We need to remove that bracket. There's a nut right here. There's another nut back here. Use a 10mm socket. Might have to get creative to get the nuts off. Just use a 10mm swivel socket. Pull that nut off. And there's another 10mm nut right here. Loosen that up. And pull that off. And then there's a bracket. You're going to pull that bracket off. There's the nut. And there's the bracket. It slides right out. Now there's 3 bolts. I'm going to use a 13mm wrench. Loosen up the stud underneath here. And the same on the back side. And you can take those out. This one. Here's the other one. And the last one, just use a 13mm socket. These glow plugs might be in your way. Just pop the top off. The vacuum pump will slide right out. You can slide that glow plug back in for now, and then just remember when you go to put it back on, we'll take it off again. We have an engine brace supporting the engine. If you don't have an engine brace, you can use a floor jack just underneath, and we're just going to use that to pump up the engine just slightly. Just take some of the tension off the engine mount. You want to make sure you stay close to the edge of the pan. You don't want to be right in the center of the pan. Just use a block of wood, and that's going to prevent the pan from cracking. So we can just push that up a little bit. That's good. We'll take these two bolts out using an 18mm socket. You can see now the motor is loose from the mount. And then using a 16mm socket, take the two bolts off the back side of the mount. Slide that out, and you can grab the mount, and it comes right out. Now taking a 16mm socket, we can access the bolt for this mount. Loosen that up. Or the bracket. Take that out. And from underneath, you should be able to get the other two bolts. There's one right here, using the same 16mm socket. You might have to lower the engine down a little bit. And take that other bolt out. Same 16mm. Loosen it up. Pull that bolt out. It's just loose in the mount right there. Now just grab the mount. We can take that bolt out. We're going to take the cover off, pop these clips off. That cover slides right out. And grab the mount or the bracket, and just slide the bracket out of the way. Out. Taking a 6mm hex socket, you want to take these 4 bolts out. Grab the pulley, and just slide off. If you have to, you might have to hit it with a hammer a little bit to loosen it up if there's some rust on there. Take that off. Now we'll take these bolts out, use a 10mm socket. And these 3 bolts, take those out, same 10mm socket. And take the timing covers off. They split. Now what we need to do is time the engine in top dead center. What you're going to do is take an 18mm socket and you can rotate the engine over until you get there. The easiest thing that I found was trying to time the injection pump first. There is a timing mark that needs to be lined up. So what you do is get on the crank and just slowly turn the crank. It's just turning the motor until you get the hole to line up to the injection pump. And if you go too far, you can go back a little bit. You don't want to go back too much, but just get that timed. Then you have a special tool that you're going to line up in the hole. Might have to move it back and forth one way or the other. And that tool is lined up. So the injection pump is timed now. Now you check your other timing marks. Then you're going to need this plate, and this should line up on the back of the cam right here. And just take a couple screws. And you don't want this tight. It just needs to be loose. So if this does not go in, so this is properly set, then the timing's not accurate. So make sure that lines up. All right, that's good. This vehicle is a manual transmission. There is a plug that you're gonna have to pull up. Just grab that plug right there. And then you can check the timing marks on there, on the flywheel. Right in this hole, you should see where there is a little tab coming down from the transmission, and there should be a V cut out in the flywheel, and you should be able to see that right there. This vehicle has an aftermarket flywheel, so this does not have a timing mark, but if you have the factory flywheel, you should find a V there, and that is the top dead center spot. Another option, not quite as accurate, is on the timing cover. There's this little cutout right there, and on the harmonic balancer, you can see there's a little tab right there. If you put this back on the car, you want to get those to line up as close as possible. So you get that to line up, and that will be top dead center. Now all the timing marks are lined up. The injection pump is lined up and the pin is in there. The cam has the lock on the backside and the crank is lined up. Timing marks are lined up. Now we're going to take a 13mm socket. We're going to loosen up the adjuster right here. Loosen that nut up. There is a special tool for this. Move this out of the way. It's going to help for when you're tightening it as well. Take the nut off. Take the adjuster off, and the belt should slide off. Might be a little tight. It just slides off like that. Slide it off the crank sprocket. Slide that off, and you can slide the belt out. Now we're going to take these pulleys off, use a 13mm socket, take this nut off. Slide that off. Now take the top one off. Same 13mm socket. Take that bolt out. Now I'm going to use a 16mm socket. We'll take this pulley off. And slides right out. Now we're going to take the water pump bolts out, use a 10mm socket. And there's 3 bolts. Take those out. You can grab the water pump, just rock it back and forth a little bit, and you should be able to pull it out. There you go. You might want to drain bucket underneath, catch some of the coolant. Take the water pump. If the O-ring's not attached, you want to put the O-ring on. You just slide it over. And you can use a little bit of dielectric grease or some silicone just to lubricate the O-ring. And slide it in position. And rock it in. And just push it in and take the new water pump bolts, get those started. Those are all in. Now we'll tighten those down. And I'm going to torque those bolts to 11 foot-pounds. Now take your idler pulley or your idler roller and you're going to replace the bolt. You want to have a new bolt and we'll install that. Go below the water pump and get that started. Now we're going to torque this to 29 foot-pounds. And then if you have a torque angle meter, you want to go an additional 90 degrees. If you don't, do the best you can. And that's good. Next, we're going to replace these bolts. We want to take them out one at a time. We're going to have to loosen this up. There is an adjustment on this. This is for the injection pump. So when you go to put the belt on, you want this loose. I'm just going to use this holding tool to prevent the sprocket from spinning, and then use a 13mm socket, loosen up the bolts. They're not that tight anyway. And then the bottom one. Bottom one's kind of hard to get to with this tool. I was able to loosen the bottom without the tool. Now I'll just take one at a time. You can see now this moves back and forth, but because we have that timing pin in there, that's okay. And put the new bolt in. And do the same for the other two. That's good. Now we're going to loosen up the cam sprocket because this needs to rotate as well when we put the belt on. Use an 18mm socket. Use something to hold the sprocket from turning. We still have that keyway on the back side of the cam, but you don't want to just rely on that. So loosen this up. Loosen that up. Before we take this bolt out, we have to break the cam sprocket free, so we're going to use this special tool. Goes on just like this. It's just a puller. Get this lined up. Going to pop off, and this is going to be loose. That is just free spinning. I'm going to take the bolt out. And you can put a new bolt in there, and then just make sure this is loose. And this one is loose. We still have the alignment pin. We still have the alignment block on the back of the cam as well. Now we can take the belt, go down below, get it on the crank pulley, and just line this up. If you want to put something in here, like a piece of foam or something to prevent the belt from falling off, you can do that. Just putting some foam down in there. Right there, that's just going to keep the belt from falling off. Run the belt over that pulley, around the water pump. Around the injection pump pulley. You want to make sure that this is kind of in the middle there. So this
pulley only goes so many notches, one way or another. So you want it somewhere in the middle when that's tight, which is good there. Over the top, over here, on the cam pulley, the cam sprocket. It's gonna go just like that. Now we can put the tensioner on, and then the other two rollers. Now with the tensioner, there is a little tab right here that when you install it, the tab has to go in this hole back here. So you want that to line up. Make sure it goes over the belt. You can pull the belt out first. It's lined up in the hole, then take the nut, get that started. Right there, we'll tension this after. We're going to put the other two idlers on. This idler with the extended part on the back side, that's going to go down below. Push the belt in, line that up, get the nut started right there. And the top idler is going to go right there. And put the bolt in. We'll tighten those down. Now we're going to torque these bolts, this nut first, to 15 foot-pounds. Same with this one. That's good. Everything looks good on all the sprockets. Now we're going to take the tool and go in the tensioner. And you can see as I tighten this down, as I turn it to the right, you can see this little pin moves. And that's the alignment pin. That just tells you there's enough tension on the belt when that's lined up properly. Tighten that nut down. Now I'm going to torque this nut to 15 foot-pounds. Good. Now before you tighten these down, you just want to double check that timing mark, make sure that's still all lined up. And we'll just snug these down. I'm using the holding tool again. I'm going to torque this to 33 foot-pounds. 33. Now we'll tighten these bolts down. Now we'll torque these to 15 foot-pounds. Watch out for the fuel lines. And at this point, you're going to have to torque these an additional 90 degrees afterwards. It's a good idea to check everything now, rotate the engine, and make sure everything lines up again, and then re-tighten these down. Well, tighten them an additional 90 degrees afterwards. Now we're going to take this pin off, pin out. You might have to move it a little bit. Loosen up some of the tension. Now you can remove the foam from down below. If you need to, rotate the engine a little bit just to take out the timing tools. Take that pin out. Now take this cam holding tool off. on the back. Now I'm going to rotate the engine 2 revolutions. So if you're watching this pin and it's lined up right around here, you want to go around 2 times. That's 1. Go around 1 more time. All right, that's where I started. With that rotation, now just double check, make sure everything lines up. This pin lines up right here. On the back side of the cam, just make sure this is lined up. Which that's lined up, just like it should be. And then check down where the flywheel is, make sure your mark is lined up there. Or if you have to, put the pulley back on with the cover and make sure that's lined up. Now we know all those settings are good. We can tighten these bolts another additional 90 degrees. Just going to use this sprocket holder for the other 2. And you don't want to put a wrench on this nut right here. You never want to loosen that nut up. That is timed properly, so from the factory. And if you loosen that up, it's going to be a mess. Just hold this. If you have a torque angle meter, then that would help, but if not, just do the best you can. All right, those are good. And take the pin out. Now I'll just take a rag with some brake parts cleaner on it and just wipe this area. We're all set with the back of the cam, so we're going to put that air pump back on, or vacuum pump. On the back of the pump, you want to replace this seal. Just pull it out with a pick. This is a new pump, so it has a fairly new seal, so we don't have to do that. Now, just line this up on the back. If you see that you have to move this a certain way, you can just twist it and line that up. Just gently, oh, I'm just going to pull that wire off again. Rock it back and forth a little bit. And get the bolt started. The front one's just the bolt, the other 2 are studs. Or bolts with a stud. And tighten those down. Now take this bracket, slide this over the studs. Take the 2 nuts and get those started. A little bit tricky to get to. And the other nut on the back. And we'll tighten those down. Tighten the back one down as well. And this hose, slide it through those retainers. And if you took this connection off for the glow plug, push that back on. Those are all good. And the hose in the back, I'm just going to put the hose clamp back on, slide that in position, and tighten that down. And just snug it down, not too tight. It's all good. Now slide this tube in place. Line it up. Remove the hose clamps. That's good. Now to take the shields, line these up. Get the bolts started. And snug those down. And line the pulley up. Get the bolts started. And tighten these down. Now take this bracket and we'll line this up. Might have to shift the motor a little bit. Just slide it in position. Once you get it in position, we can lower it a little, but we're going to take the bolts. The longer bolt's going to go there, and the smaller bolts are going to go in the other positions. That's good. get those bolts started. And tighten those down. I'll tighten this down. That's tight. Now I'll put the timing cover on. Slide that in position. Make sure that's all lined up. That's good. And then clip it down. And there's another clip way down there and up there. There we go. It's on. Now I take the mount. Line it up, take the bolts, get those started. Those are all started. Before I tighten those down, I am going to raise the engine a little bit so that it's closer to the mount. Raise it up slightly. Now I tighten these down. Just go back and forth, make sure you tighten them evenly. Yeah, we'll tighten these down. Actually, I can lower that a little bit. Right there. That's good. Now I'll tighten these down. Now you can remove the floor jack. And if you had a upper engine support, you can remove that at this time. Now we're going to put the reservoir back in position. Just slide that back in place. Just to make it easier, I'm just going to take this hose right here, get that started. Just so it doesn't drip. And move the hose clamp back in position. Now put the bolt back in, line that up. And tighten it down. Snug, that's good. At this point, if you want to add the fluid, you can put the fluid back in. Put the cap back on, snug it down. Take the coolant reservoir, line the hose up down below, push that on. And move the clamp. With that in place, connect the connector. Push the wires into the retainers. Push this hose on right here. Move the clamp. And put the 2 screws in. And snug them down. I'm going to show you how to preload the tensioner. If you wanted to, you could do this in the vehicle before you took it out. Just take your 16mm wrench. I'm just going to move the tensioner in this position. And then you're going to take a pin or even a drill bit that fits, something that's in that location. And you're going to go through that hole into the other hole, and that's going to be preloaded. Then you could load this into the vehicle, and it's preloaded so you can put the belt on. And when you're ready, you just pull the pin out, and it tensions the belt automatically. Now we're going to take the tensioner, put the bolts in, get those started. Now this tensioner has this pin in it, so it's already preloaded. I'll slide it up in position. Get those bolts lined up. And just reach up, get 1 or 2 started. We can do the rest from up top. All right, that's good. Now we can reach in, tighten those down. Now snug those down. All right, those are snug. Now slide this pipe on. And just put it in position. And if you have a clamp down there, you want to put that clamp back on. Or if you have the worm clamp, we'll tighten that down. Get that lined up. And it's lined up, and we'll tighten that down. one more. Snug it down. All right, that's good. Now move this hose clamp over. And that's good. Take the serpentine belt. We're gonna go over the power steering pump pulley first. So get that all the way up top. Get that around that pulley. That's good right there. Now come down and around the idler pulley, and you're going to go back up over the alternator pulley, just like that. And that's going to go around the crankshaft pulley, and then come down around the AC compressor. So that's loaded like that. Now I'll take the tensioner and use a 16mm wrench, loosen that, and then take that pin out, just like that, and let it go. Just double check all your pulleys, they're all around there properly, and that's good. Now I'm going to put this hose back on. You want to push that clamp back in place, make sure that's set properly. Slide this over. Lock it in, slide it over here onto the cooler. Now I'll move the hose clamp, position there. That's good. Get the nut on. And we'll tighten that down. I'll put the inner fender well in. Just get it lined up. Get the screws started. And tighten those down.
At this point, you want to put that panel back up and screw in the fasteners.
Put the wheel on, line it up. Put the lug studs in. Now I'm going to torque the lug nuts to 89 foot-pounds in a cross pattern to tighten the wheel down evenly. Just go around again, double check. Now you want to add the appropriate coolant to the reservoir, fill it up, then run the engine for about 15 minutes, constantly monitoring, making sure the engine is not overheating. After that, shut the vehicle down, let it cool down, and then adjust the level accordingly. And then put the cap back on. Now we can put the cover back on, just line it up. If you have those nuts or screws, you want to put those in now and tighten those down. Now connect the battery, the negative terminal, line that up. And we'll tighten this down. Make sure that's snug, give it a wiggle, that's good. And put the cover on, line that up. And lock it down.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.